You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Not often do we have two people, do we do a podcast with...
Sorry, do you
Double
want to
up.
start? Well, do you want to start that again?
Yes. It's not often since we've been doing this, Don, that we've had people come back and do a second podcast with us.
Well,
But,
the first person, they must have made a real impression if we've inviting them back.
Or they might have something else to say.
Yes.
But let's not guess about that, Don. Why don't we just get on with it, and we'll introduce the person who's been on here before. Now, this person has been, you might gather by the fact when I say she's been an actress, that it's a woman that we're going to speak to. She's been an actress.
Well, we should ask her if she'd like to be referred to as an actress or an actor.
Well, Don, when I've introduced her, that's exactly what we might do. Mm-hmm. Or you can think of any other irrelevant questions to ask her.
Sure.
But she's been an actress and she's been a model, as in a model. And she's an entrepreneur and she's an author. She's written 2 very, very popular books. One of them was called Click Monkey, about who would be safe with your kids. And the other is called The Witches of Toorak. And she wrote that because, well, this is not necessarily why we've got her in here, because she's in here for a different reason this time. As I said, we sometimes have different information that we like to speak to our second attendees that have been on here before. She was in the United Kingdom. She was Coca-Cola's Sprite Girl. She launched Sprite onto the market. She's been on The Price is Right, but her great claim to fame here up until now, because she's got stuff to tell us, her great claim to fame was that she was Sarah Beaumont on Neighbours, and this launched her in a whole different career direction, Don. And if I could just say this, and she probably doesn't want to be known as this, but she probably does because it's on the information bubble that's called Wikipedia. She was voted the second, and we asked her this the last time, she's the second most sexiest woman in FHM. I'm not sure what FHM means. It means fashion something. And yeah, we'll ask what it... In 1998 and 1999, she was voted in successive the second most sexiest woman in the world, which begs the question, who is the most sexy? If this woman we're looking at now wasn't the most sexiest, I'd like to know who was the most sexiest. So anyhow, she's here for a different reason, because she is the partner of a man standing for the Senate in Victoria called Nick Klonderidis, which you don't want to mispronounce that name, because that could get onto a whole different subject of what Klonderidis means. So anyhow, and she is very welcome here because she's a star and we love her, and she said she won't belt you around the ears, Don, and her name is Nikola Charles.
Hello.
Welcome, Nikola, again.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, guys. How you doing?
What part of all that did I stuff up? That was pretty accurate, wasn't it?
Okay, so the first most sexiest woman in the world was Jenny McCarthy, who was on MTV at the time.
Jenny McCarthy, who
Blonde.
I've never heard of.
Oh, she's gorgeous. To be fair, though, mine are real and were real and hers were not, so she had a slight advantage over me.
I see. So they don't examine those,
no.
like don't squeeze or
No.
I see.
Thank goodness in the interview, no. And what else was there?
That was a bit of a bitchy comment, wasn't it?
A bit of a bitchy comment. FHM means For Him magazine.
Oh, for him, I shouldn't have done that.
For men. And I was not on The Price is Right. I went to go on The Price is Right and got shoved into Neighbours.
I see. So that was a stepping stone, and Neighbours, Sarah Beaumont she was, Don. Oh, she still is, but she's not Sarah Beaumont anymore. Is Neighbours still going?
No, it's not. It just got cancelled.
It did, didn't it?
Yeah. I would say at this juncture that they probably don't appreciate you mentioning my name with Neighbours and Coca-Cola, because I've become a bit of a
political
conspiracy
activist.
theory. Yeah, well, I guess so. I don't like to think that I'm a political activist. I'm just a truth seeker. I really am.
So what have you done to put them offside?
Okay, well, the first thing that happened...
Back the conservative side of politics, Don.
Well, it did start, actually, when I was on your podcast, guys, because we were talking about Trump, right? And you guys were saying, well, you liked him, didn't you, Sam?
Love him.
Yeah, you guys were saying, why do you support him, this, that, and the other? And I was trying to gently, having been a political observer for years, because politics is like a hobby for me globally, and I did live in America for 7 years. And I think I got people offside at that point. Well, in fact, I know I did, because that was the first time I got deplatformed from Twitter with 40,000 followers.
Now, hang on. So when you came on our show to do an interview like you're doing now, you were taken off Twitter immediately afterwards?
Yes.
Because you were on our show or because of what you said on Twitter?
They said that it was something else, but obviously...
Disinformation or something.
Yeah.
Come on, be specific. Tell us what's going on. You're being evasive.
We might get put off again, Don.
I think the problem is that it's funny, we talk about equity and equality a lot with regard to all kinds of things, women, racial equality. I'm both. I'm an immigrant and I'm a female, and I was a single mum for a long time. And I think for myself, and even though they say, we're looking for equity and equality, in this world, I have to tell you, as a woman, it's not appreciated when you think for yourself.
Yeah, but
so
you
they
haven't
shut
been
you up.
specific. You're talking in generalities, and I can't understand. They'd put you off Twitter or whatever it was for a specific reason. What did you do?
Okay. So in March, April 2020, during my radio show on SEN, I fell sick with COVID, and I ended up having it for 6 weeks, and it wasn't pleasant. And I was very worried because we were being told, wear masks, social distance, this is a horribly catching virus, you're going to make everyone sick, don't go to the supermarket. I think one person in a household was allowed to go to a supermarket. And a strange thing happened. I continued to be intimate with my partner while I was sick. And he didn't get sick. And so I started asking questions. How could that possibly be? If I've got this terrible, horrible thing that's very catching, how come someone that is often intimate with me is not sick at all and has never been sick?
Could I ask you a question?
Yes.
Did you have it, though?
Oh, yes. When you have it, you know. And so I just started sort of questioning, and because I lived in America for 7 years and I had also a political radio show over there, I was speaking to some of my contacts, and they started telling me some of this information that we're being fed is what they call a false flag. Well, I'd never even heard of the term false flag before. I didn't know what it meant. They said you need to look deeper. It's a very big rabbit hole.
Yeah,
There's something happening here, my friend.
No, so we've been speaking about this on the previous episode today, about just what is going on.
Could I be self-indulgent?
Yes.
No, please, Don.
Do
If
go
it
for
makes
it.
you feel
The older I get,
comfortable.
the older I'm starting to believe in a thing called fate. Women are kind of into this. Men are more, black and white.
Yeah.
Now, why is it in this case? Now, this is the third female.
Speak
On
up,
Saturday, I haven't seen a friend. I was at a horse show and we just started talking about things. Haven't seen her well before COVID. And I think you're going to go down the same line as this lady about this misinformation. And she blew my mind. She started talking about other websites. Then, the next, and this is just fun. You come on here today, and on Sunday, I met another lady I haven't seen for 3 years, well before COVID. We just started talking, and they're not related, and I didn't say anything about my previous... She started talking about this ulterior news sources that I think you're going to go down the track of, and it's a little bit scary. I found it mind-blowing and a bit scary.
It is, and that's the thing. Okay, so I'm someone... I don't know if it's because I'm a mum. I don't know if it's you
Is
know.
it because you're a female, do you think? There's 3 females that have done it to me in the past.
No, you said the aviation man, Mr. Hood, he was on.
Well, he would know. He wasn't going down hold.
Yeah, he was.
Graham Hood, the aviation man, he was what these girls were quoting. And I suppose you'll quote Graham Hood, or you know of Graham Hood.
I know of him. I don't watch too much because I'm really into. It's funny, the politicians talk a lot about the science and the data, and then they ignore it because a lot of Pfizer data just got brought out because of a court order, and there aren't any politicians discussing it.
Exactly.
So you can't, and also there have been court cases in South Australia where they've asked them to produce the science and the data that the health orders were based on, and they won't or they can't. So I grew up with a mother working in microbiology. For 30 years she was in a microbiology lab, and so I was never allowed to have antibiotics growing up, because she said no, because if you get used to them and then you ever reach a point where you do need them, they might not work. So I did reach a point where I needed them. I got sick as a young teenager, and luckily they helped. And so I started, as you say, going down this rabbit hole, and I was getting information from military sources that I have in the USA. And these are whistleblowers, and also in Australia as well, and they are posted all over the world. And they started saying, you know, be careful, do your own research, all that kind of thing. Now, what happened next was, in April when I recovered from COVID, I felt like a superhuman because I thought, that's it now, you know. It's that old thing, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. I was like, boom, I've done it. So then I got this information way early, April 2020. I went on YouTube and I sat at the desk in my office and I said, because I was very aware of my fan base, and I said, you guys are going to think this is crazy. I'm calling this little clip conspiracy theory. But I've heard that quite soon we're going to need a health passport to go buy eggs. And it was a short 20-minute clip, a video. I said, I've heard this from my contacts in the US military. And the video stayed up there for about 6 months, and the views were slowly climbing. And then after 6 months, I got a message from YouTube saying, it's been removed, and you're no longer allowed to post on YouTube. So what it looks like is my prior life, as you say, Sam, a model, an actress, actor.
Author.
I don't mind either. Interviews I've done on the Circle TV show, on the morning shows, all that's fine. That can stay there because that didn't affect anyone, you know, in the words of Klaus Schwab, the narrative, the story that they want to give. So in a way, I find that a little bit annoying because if people look me up, that's who they think I am. And I've become so much more than that. And so the information that I've discovered that you're probably referring to, Don, down the rabbit hole, information I consider the truth, has been buried. But the thing is, the truth always floats to the surface. It is going to be exposed. Now, what's come out in the last 72 hours is so explosive. It's so incredibly explosive. But when you go back to that time where I was deplatformed, April 2020, CNN in America actually reported once on this very subject that's come out in the last 72 hours.
Well, what's come out in the last 72 hours?
You're going to get to that, aren't you?
They reported on it and then it was quashed, and they were obviously told not to report on it again.
CNN were told.
Yes.
Yep.
That the Wuhan coronavirus was venom derived from the crate snake and the king cobra. And that it was that because this inability to breathe isn't an upper respiratory infection at all. It's what happens when the toxins from this venom, and this is a story that's broken on the Stu Peters show in the last 72 hours, but as I said, it goes back to January 2020 on CNN.
So CNN, who are an apologist for dopey Joe Biden and his predecessor, for them to say this, and then
It's out there.
It's a bit like Hunter Biden's laptop. They refuted that for 2 years, and suddenly they realise it's absolutely a fact. So if they want to be a credible pretend to be a credible news source, they've got to actually report that, because that is a fact. So if this is a fact and they've now stopped saying it, have they been nobbled?
Well, yeah, obviously Fauci, and we don't really know who's behind it, but we're starting to learn, aren't we, that it's the World Economic Forum and the UN, and they have this agenda, and they want this future for us. But I'm just finding a lot of inaccuracies, a lot of things that just don't make sense. And it's not just to do with the illness or the cure or who's making money or who's not making money. It's everything else that they're talking about as well. Like, they talk about equity, okay? They talk about equity. Equity seems to be
as opposed to equality.
Yeah, seems to be available to you if you're obedient, or if you allow your hand to be inserted with a chip so you can pay for your shopping. They make it sound really, really positive. But you're no longer welcome here. You're no longer allowed to work in Australia. You can work in the UK if you're unvaccinated, but you can't in Australia. We're all the Commonwealth. My friends and family in the UK haven't missed a single mortgage payment because they're all in the office, jabbed and unjabbed, all working together. But it seems to be different down under. So equality is fine if you're obedient and you do as you're told, but if you're unjabbed, equality goes out the window. So I find that a bit interesting. Then they talk about climate change, and they say that 70% of all humans are going to live in the cities, in the smart cities. They don't want anyone in the countryside anymore. They want them in the cities, apparently, cloaked in this 5G radiation, because everything's connected to the chip in your hand, to your smart fridge, to your smart television, to the smart meter, to your car. And yet they say that with social distancing prevents disease. But if we're all jammed into the cities like battery chickens, surely that's going to spread disease. So then you have to question why they would want to do that. Now they're telling us to drive electric cars, okay? The electricity to drive electric cars comes from fossil fuel coal, or it comes from nuclear fusion. So it's either dirty or dangerous. And you think, well, okay, they're looking to get rid of that. Well, no, because Scott Morrison said just last week, none of the coal mines are going to close because they need at least 5 years warning. I guarantee you, we won't get 5 years warning before we're told you can't drive your diesel ute anymore.
And none of the coal-fired power plants in China are closing, because they still import record amounts of coal to power their coal-powered
That's right.
station,
Which is probably
power
why
stations in China.
That's right. And so financially, this would be why Australia would keep them open. But you try driving your family in a year or so's time in your Toyota Corolla down to Phillip Island to see the penguins at the weekend, and see how many digital dollars come out of your bank account in carbon tax for your Toyota Corolla.
So, Nikola, there's been a push, just as I saw it this morning on the overseas news, there's been a push by the climate activists to now go around all the areas and deflate the tyres of SUVs as a climate protest about driving SUVs.
See, why are we encouraging violence and vandalism?
That's it. To talk about the BLM people seriously. So I just want you to get back to the venom on the snakes. I missed the significance of what you were saying there. Did I miss that, or what?
Well, you're talking about, okay, it sort of goes back to what Don was saying as well, because I was here to support my partner.
Yes, we'll do that in a minute.
Yep. But this all goes back to, I was also asked to move into politics with the Informed Medical Options Party, and it was all gung-ho and it was going to happen. And I was threatened on social media by zero following accounts that should I go into politics, some really rather unsavoury things were going to happen to me, which I won't repeat because I wouldn't want to give anyone any ideas. But the threats were ongoing and consistent, and that was on my second Twitter account called Cha-Cha Charles. So I want to say hi to all my Cha-Cha Charles fans because they were amazing. And that Twitter account also then got deplatformed shortly after I received all the threats. And so I was actually too afraid. And what I worry about as well is we seem to have a situation now where it's kind of state-sponsored bullying is allowed. Bullying of the unvaccinated is allowed. Bullying of a truth seeker, a freedom fighter who wanted to get into politics is allowed. Yet if I go to, say, Joe Biden's Twitter account and I try and write, "You're an idiot." An idiot is quite a soft word, I think, in this day and age. A little warning will come up saying, "Oh, people who said that comment usually get deleted. Do you want to change it?"
Yeah, no, that's happened to me. I did.
That's right. But what comes your way,
And they
the
change-
words that come your way, the things that have been said to me, the threats that have been made, how come on the other end they didn't get a little warning
Of
going,
course.
"Oh, you can't say that to her"? They're allowed to,
No.
but I can't say.
Well, same
But you
thing.
wouldn't have the same screening as what Joe Biden
No.
has got.
John, I said something along those lines.
To
and it
Biden,
It was
or
just
to
an
a
example.
notable.
Yeah.
To a notable.
To anyone, really. I
Yeah.
can't say that to anyone.
No, hang on.
No,
There's notables and unnotables.
No, someone who said something about me.
Yes.
And I don't often respond, but I thought, I quite enjoyed it. So I responded with some. It was pretty. It wasn't swear, and I said something, and the note came back and said, "This is fairly abrasive stuff, and would you like to change it?" And I said, "No, I wouldn't." And they changed it anyhow. In
That's
fact,
right.
they didn't put it on, or they changed it because I read it and I thought, I didn't say that. So I know it. So this is just a control by a corrupt media organisation and a social platform that want to keep their party of choice in power and don't worry about free speech or any of that.
But don't you think that's been going on for a while? We mentioned
not as
earlier
bad as
about
this.
Murdoch,
No.
controlling politics within Australia, America or England
No, but
with
that's
his papers and his
but
news
hang
outlets.
on, Murdoch can have his opinion on Fox and all the stations he owns here. He can put out his newspapers and radio programs and television. If you don't wish to watch them, you don't have to. But when you have social platforms like Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook and Twitter and Instagram that actually stop people communicating with
way they
one
want
another
to.
if they don't agree with what you're saying, whether it's
But why use those mediums to communicate?
there's no other
can-
social platform mediums.
Well, we used to do it before these media platforms were available.
That's exactly, we used to do it, but now they've taken over and they tried to parlor, I think
Parler, yeah.
Trump got put off Twitter and Parler started up a thing, and it wasn't a political thing necessarily. It just said, we will let you say what you want to say within reason. Well, not within reason, but you can't slander or libel or threaten people with suicide, or like death. And that was taken down because Parler goes out over a network that is controlled by the very people that run the social media platforms.
They pulled the infrastructure.
They pull.
Nikola, can I ask you, I've just been awakened to this. Does this type of thought process or exposure to appeal to women? Because is it just coincidental that I've never had this before, and in the last 4 days, 3 women have come, and you're not related to one another. But do you think this type of thing appeals to women?
I think maybe it does. I wouldn't want to I mean, I can't obviously generalise, but I do feel that there's sort of a maternal protection instinct thing that is kicking in. I think when things don't make sense and red flags go up inside a woman's head, I know there's a lot of talk in the mainstream media at the moment saying that all these conspiracy theorists are people that were abused as children, which I thought was...
because they just make it up. They're
Yeah,
just trying to discredit every
That's
single...
right, just discredit and invalidate anyone that's got a different opinion. But yeah, I know what you're saying, but I also know a lot of males. I mean, Joe Rogan is doing his best to get some truth out there. But
And threatened.
I mean, I'm just getting very worried because this control of this narrative, which is a story, is getting a little bit out of control. When you've got people that were involved, and it's now proven that Moderna was involved in the creation of COVID-19. That's been in the press. When you've got them so heavily involved in the cure, and now they've done a deal with the Victorian government and Monash, and they're going to build this huge mRNA vaccine factory in Victoria, I just have great concerns about what that means for the health of this country.
Now, before we get on to Nick Clonarides,
yes,
just before we get on to that, I don't think you gave me an answer, not that, because I probably interrupted you. What is the snake venom? What were you going? What was that theory about that? The snake venom is what started COVID, or did you not say that?
There was a scientist in China called Liu Bing, and Liu.
Is that a woman?
Man, Bing, and he discovered it a long time ago, and he did a number of research papers.
Is he still alive?
No.
No, that's right. I've seen that. And then there was also a woman that did it as well. She defected to America and blew the lid on, and wouldn't be reported on the mainstream media, but Fox covered her because she seemed pretty credible.
Scientists are now trying to get hold of Liu Bing's research papers, which they said, oh, don't worry, we'll release those, but they never came. Now, this cobra venom has COVID-19 toxins that attack different organ structures inside its victim. So if that's a human or a rat or a sheep or a lizard. And what it does is and it's annoying that we're sort of not really allowed to talk about this stuff, because we should be allowed to have open discourse, but politics doesn't seem to allow for that anymore.
The social media don't allow it.
Yeah. But the politicians don't do any where they talk back. They just talk at you now. There's no conversation. But
they probably don't know, in all fairness.
God, I hope you're right about that, Don, because if they do know, we're in real trouble. That what it does is it stops the... It freezes your ability to breathe inside. So it does feel like an upper respiratory thing. But because because it's venom, that's why it's not catching. That's why when I had intimate relations with someone, they didn't catch what I had.
It's not contagious.
Yeah.
So if it's
not contagious, how is it spreading?
It?
There is a theory as to how it's spreading, but I don't want to get you deplatformed.
Yeah, but see, you just talked about snakes, but I understood that it initially came from rats, Wuhan.
Well, Dr.
bats.
Fauci, let me just tell you something. Anthony Fauci is the biggest fraud that has ever existed. This has been proven time and time again. The damage he did with this AZT drug to the gay community in the 80s is just appalling, and we should have listened. So many times with so many scenarios, there are alarm bells and red flags, and we don't listen. Well, it doesn't affect our community, so we don't care. So I remember growing up, being a teenager in the 80s, and Fauci was saying that AIDS occurred because a gay man had sex with a monkey in Africa. Mm-hmm. And I literally, as a teenager, believed that because I was so impressionable. Then we had swine flu, of course, pigs. It's all the pigs' fault. Then we had bird flu. Well, that's all the birdies' fault. Well, actually, that was because of Bill Gates' genetically modified chickens in Africa.
And we had mad cows.
Then we've had mad cows. And then, of course, we have bats with COVID. So it's never Fauci, it's never a lab, it's never gain of function, it's never research, it's always the animals.
So Nikola, I'm not sure how you'd answer this, but you said you don't want to get deplatformed by giving your version or theory on how COVID spreads if you don't think it's contagious because you've been sleeping with your partner who had it, or you had it and he didn't get it. And you said, Don said, how does it spread then if in that case? And you said, I don't want to get deplatformed. Are you saying that you can't speak to us in answer to a question about what you think or what other people think about why it spreads? Because you're about to libel or slander a company. You can't libel or slander a company.
It's not a company. If you watch a documentary that was released 2 days ago on April 11th called Watch the Water, you'll find out.
And who did that?
Stu Peters.
Who?
Stu Peters.
Stu, S-T-U.
S-T-E-W, Peters.
Oh, Stu Peters.
Stuart.
Stu Peters.
Is that Stuart Peters?
Yeah.
Or is that...
Stu Peters show, yeah.
But Nicola,
And
don't
so,
you
all
think...
right.
The thing that worries me with all of this, what credibility of these people, anybody could do that. What I find frustrating with social media, it's a new form of letting information out. And you can remain faceless and put whatever you really want to put out there.
Oh, yeah, they're happy for you to be faceless, nameless. Right now, I exist on Twitter as an anime, as a cartoon, and not my name. And I'm allowed to say and share whatever I like. A small group of my cohort, my followers, my dedicated sort of truth seekers and freedom fighters, they know it's me, but they never say my name.
Even Stu Peters that you're talking about could be a fake as well. What credibility has he got?
Well, he has a huge show, but...
Well,
So you say if Stu Peters is out on a social media platform, I presume, and he says watch the water. I think was it what
yes,
you said?
Yes, the documentary.
And you say you won't say it here, but he's out on a social media platform and has still said it. Why can't you say what his theory of watch the water is about how COVID spreads?
I've been threatened, and I don't know by who.
Well, how about you tell me, and we'll get threatened. So if I look up Stu Peters and it says, so that's what he means by watch the water, either it's being contaminated or there's being stuff put into it by governments or other people. Or
well, there's a scientist in the documentary explaining it and talking about what Liu Bing found, and it's just super...
So if I Google it now while you're speaking and say, so that's what he means, and I mention it, how can we get deplatformed for if it's already on there? Stu Peters. Is he saying that, not you or us, is he saying that someone is contaminating the water with a view to spreading all this?
Well, he actually had to put systems in place with the documentary that the information would still get out there if he wasn't around anymore. That's how sensitive the subject is.
This is scary stuff. This is how these women were talking over the weekend too.
Hey,
I
Nick.
don't know.
Hey, Nikola. You said your partner never caught COVID.
That's right.
Same with me. I just put it down to the other person's immune is a lot stronger.
Right.
It would happen, it doesn't have to be a conspiracy.
But with every other cold and flu and illness that one of us has had, the other one catches it, within sort of 5 or 6 days. It goes through the kids, it goes through the family, but not this one. And look, you might say, okay, you're a conspiracy theorist, this is rubbish, none of this is true. So then, okay, so let's you only have to look at facts that are true, that people have also said are conspiracy theories about other things politically and within governments and within the system, like the 28 known paedophiles that were discovered in an inquiry in Australian politics, one of them an ex-prime minister, but the names are redacted because we're not allowed to know in the Royal Commission. We're not allowed to know the names of those Australians.
Why hasn't that gone?
Why are we protecting paedophiles?
Why hasn't that gone in the mainstream media?
So
I think there's a reason why it hasn't gone to mainstream media.
Why? Well, what's the reason?
Because for some reason they're protected.
So this was on. I saw that on the on Twitter or something, that someone at a public forum approached a person, high-profile politician, and said exactly that to him.
Yeah.
Who, and I won't mention his name, but like a seriously high-profile politician who is hoping to be.
Yeah. Anyway, don't keep
Prime
going.
Asked him that exact question. So
And
about
he said?
the pedophiles. Pardon?
And he said?
No, he didn't. He didn't answer it.
Of course he didn't.
Because
So is that a conspiracy theory, or are they trying to protect somebody?
Well, or is it a smear campaign by the opposition? How do you know what?
Well, it's not the opposition because it's in the past. It's gone. This is former. So we still can't know. Why is that? Why are we protecting them? Take another example. As I just said to you, Scott Morrison has announced that we can't close down the coal mines. You might get carbon tax for driving your Corolla to Phillip Island to see the penguins, but we're not going to close all these coal plants. Why aren't the Greens jumping around? Why aren't the Greens, they're green, right? Why aren't they saying this is disgraceful, shut the coal mines? Why? Because they're all on the same team. The Greens, Labour and Liberal, I believe, are the same entity. They are good cop, bad cop. They are controlled opposition. You vote for one of those three, you're voting for the same party and the same stuff to happen again. And if we end up, they say we've got 1 to 2 years to push back against this digitalisation agenda. You know, this digitalisation agenda means that essentially all of our assets cease to exist, if you're lucky enough to have any at the end of this pandemic. You know, the value of your home, your car, anything else is digitised. So with the press of a button, because, you know, you jaywalked across the street at 1:43 p.m. yesterday afternoon, so there's $1,000, 1,000 digipoints gone out of your account. You paid your parking fine late. It's just monstrous, you know. And they want everyone to move into the cities. They don't want anyone in the countryside. I don't know why. I feel like they're going to mine the countryside. But it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's starting to feel like, you know, prisoners are not allowed to roam. That they have to stay within a certain boundary. And this is what we're starting to say to innocent people, and this just can't be allowed to happen. So if we have to vote for minor parties and minor people who are going to stand up, even if it's just one vote against all this, are you trying to look for the answer?
It's so hard. They make it so hard to find out what he has said. It says, first of all, they call him a far-right podcaster, which means he just has a different opinion to...
That's right.
So it is so hard to
You're
find
looking
out...
for Stu Peters.
I've looked at it. I've got him on here, but it is so hard to find out what is controversial about what he said, and I just can't
But
find
also
it.
ask yourself this question, okay? We are 2.5 years down the COVID track.
Stu Peters over COVID lies, he said. So they've decided he's saying it was lying because they don't have his opinion, but yet you can't read what it is that he is lying about. I can't, anyhow.
Could I ask you a question, Nikola? So how long have you been down this track?
Since April 2020.
Okay, so from April 2020, there are obviously predictions or things said. Have they materialised from April 2020 to now? And tell me what they are, please.
So, yes, you're right. When people are called conspiracy theorists, things do often come true. And they now say that a conspiracy theorist is like Nostradamus. But, for example, the YouTube thing that I said, that we'll need a health passport to go to the shops, that happened.
Where?
Yeah, with your vaccination
Yeah.
certificate.
No.
Yeah.
Might I just...
Hang on, Johnny.
Well, this
what
is
do you mean it happened?
Unvaccinated people who've paid their taxes their entire life can't work in Coles or Woolworths or can't go into the office. They can't go and cool down at the local swimming pool.
But isn't this a matter of interpretation? You said something there about... but isn't that a matter of interpretation as to what is what and what is not?
Well, not really, because there's a whole segment of society whose lives have been severely diminished. They can't earn a living.
Is that the unvaccinated?
Yeah.
So in Queensland, they've just announced, you would be across this, in Queensland, they've announced the mandates for unvaccinated are going to be abolished.
That's right.
So do you think in the past 2 years that they've tried to keep a lid on everything so people aren't spreading the virus and things like that?
How are they spreading it? Because they say social distancing is bullshit, wearing masks is bullshit, isolating is bullshit. This is why this is a problem. It says Spotify prohibits, this is Stu Peters, Spotify prohibits content on the platform which promotes dangerous, false, or dangerous, deceptive content about COVID-19. And it said when it comes to when the content violates the standard identified, the appropriate enforcement action is taken. And then the next paragraph, it says, unlike the traditional supporters of Trump and Fox News. So it is a political...
Stu Peters is saying this, is he?
No, this is Spotify who limit, or the social media platform who limit who can read what's stupid, because I can't find...
So tell me why any social media platform, not just podcasts, but any social media platform has a right to edit another human being's opinion.
No,
I've done a bit of publishing, right? So you have to sign a publishing contract for that publisher to be able to edit your work. That is a legal precedent. No one is allowed to edit another person's work, opinion, or printed matter without a contract. None of us signed any contracts with social media.
But
why are we being edited?
So to make it...
Well, just like the publisher would do with your book. You've given the publisher permission to edit your book.
With a contract?
Yes.
There's no contract with social media. They have no right to edit you.
Terms and conditions.
Unless it's a threat.
when
Look,
you
if it's
sign
a
up.
threat to another person, sure, get rid of it.
But the simplistic example of this is that a week before the election, the New York Post brought out an explosive expose on Hunter Biden's laptop, which is the son of the president, about the corruption and the snout that the Biden family had in the troughs of Ukraine and the Chinese governments. And they were precluded from mentioning it. They were taken off Twitter. They were told it was Russian disinformation and all that. And now they have said it's absolutely true after the election has been won and lost, however fraudulent you think that was. And now they say it's absolutely true. But those people managed to absolutely manipulate...
Delay the truth. It's like a truth delay.
So, Nicola, you're in here... You're in here because you are campaigning for Nick Clonderidis.
Cloneritis.
Not no D in it, Cloneritis. And he is standing for the Victorian Senate for the Informed Medical Options Party. I presume the two planks of his platform very naively or bluntly saying is that he's an anti-vaxxer and he's into corruption. He's against...
He'd fit right in if he was.
He's into the corruption that's prevailing in the state.
No, he's
government.
absolutely not an anti-vaxxer. He's pro-choice, pro-freedom. He wants to get rid of the no jab, no job legislation because they pushed that through as a legislation, so that he finds that very unfair, and that's party-wide.
I think they've relaxed that, haven't they? Because there are people no jab going back to work.
But I'm just subtly saying, when I said he's an anti-vaxxer, that's what the opposition immediately would seize on that. The opposition to him would immediately seize on saying he's an anti-vaxxer. But that's, you say...
But I don't, as I said to
I'm
you...
not saying that.
Yeah, but I find that... I really don't like the way human psychology has been pushed to this point of jumping on board with state-sponsored bullying of groups like anti-vaxxers or Trump supporters or freedom fighters or whatever, because I think human nature, we've always had this gang mentality, you know, this goes back hundreds of years, thousands of years, I'm sure, where we do like to be in gangs, we do like to be in groups, one against the other.
We'd like to be told or led.
Yeah, and it's like pick a side. And so the freedom fighters consider the pro-vaccinators a cult, and the pro-vaccinators consider the freedom fighters anti-vaxxers. But this has all been manipulated and designed by people who want to drive a wedge between citizens, which I don't consider that to be good leadership.
And this was no more apparent or evident when Justin Trudeau completely nobbled the trucking industry, and the truckers, whether they were anti or whether they wanted pro-choice about vaccination, were precluded from earning a living because he said everyone had to be vaccinated. And they peacefully, unlike BLM, who ravaged America for 2 years and burnt the whole joint to the ground, they peacefully protested and had their bank accounts frozen, had their threatened with jail. That's what's going on, and that's why people, and that's what will happen. We don't hope it does. That's what will happen here. This government is out of control. It is corrupt. It is dishonest. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
And yet you have a company like iCook Foods, who...
You're talking about the Victorian government,
I
not
am.
the Commonwealth government.
No, I'm talking about Victoria. We were the laughing stock of the world here 6 months ago with the draconian nonsense that this government went on with.
Well, what I want to know is, like at the beginning of the pandemic when they were saying it was bats, Fauci and the group who were doing this were saying it's bats, it's bats, it's bats. Of course, it's animals again. And we weren't allowed to say that it was gain of function or a lab leak. Do you remember that?
It was what?
Yeah.
Gain of function or a lab leak. We weren't allowed to say that at the beginning.
The US government were putting money into the Wuhan, Newman
Research
Centre.
Yeah.
To do exactly that, and Fauci denied it, and now it's become an absolute
But then
fact.
it became okay. So right now, you're probably streets ahead discussing this other thing that's come out on Stu Peters. And right now, we'll probably be demonised for saying it, thinking it, discussing it. But who knows, in 4 weeks' time or 6 months' time, it might be like the lab leak theory. It might be, suddenly it's on the front pages. By the way, it's from a snake.
We still don't know what Stu Peters said, Nikola.
Well, it's an hour-long documentary.
What is it?
It's an hour-long documentary. You'd have to watch the whole thing.
Can you... I'm uninitiated to this, but I got from one of these ladies a clip. Now, on the bottom of the clip, it had Rumble. Can you tell me about Rumble, please?
Oh, Rumble's great. It's like an alternative YouTube, and it lets people pretty much speak freely.
Yeah. But that's what Parler tried to do.
Yeah, Rumble's
So Rumble
good.
hasn't been closed down, or Parler?
No, Rumble hasn't been closed
Why?
down.
Is it censored?
This documentary is on Rumble.
Is it censored, Rumble?
I don't know.
Why is Parler closed down?
Yeah.
You said it's the
Well,
same type of
if
platform.
they get
I think Parler got closed down because the guy that had shares in it is on Fox, isn't he? What was his name?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, so what's that matter? Because it gave
If they
Trump,
don't like something you've
it gave
said...
Trump an outlet to... Because he got...
Well, he was a big Trump fan, yeah.
Yeah, because Trump got precluded, cancelled from Twitter. The President of the United States got cancelled from Twitter while every other demon and despot in the world's on it. And so he went to what's it called?
Parler.
He went to Parler, and he was gaining too much. They are shit scared of him.
Oh, they'll take anyone down too. They'll even take their own down. The left are really good at eating themselves. And so they took down Naomi Wolf, Dr. Naomi Wolf, who was a very prominent lefty for years and years. And she started also, as a smart female, Don, she started saying, hang on, this COVID stuff's not making any sense. Yeah. Well, now she's working with Steve Bannon on the War Room, and she's got...
Steve Bannon had helped Trump.
He's got
I
a
saw
show
her on the television yesterday.
Yeah, so they've got a few teams of researchers going through these masses and masses of FISA documents that are now coming out because of this court order, and she's got scientists and doctors going through them and sort of releasing what's coming out, which is basically that an awful lot of adverse reactions, were hidden and they shouldn't.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
And what I think really disappoints me in politics generally, but also in Australia, because I expected Australians to have more of a fuck you attitude. I didn't think Australians could be pushed around as much as I've seen them pushed around in the last couple of years. Is that why can't we ask any of our politicians about that? Why haven't any of our
they're just the same as you and I and just been elected. They're no more gifted than you and I.
But these have been out for weeks and weeks now, Don. So, okay, let's assume that they're stupid. Let's assume our politicians are stupid. I know thousands of freedom fighters who've sent them that information, who've said to them on their social media pages, and also emailed to their office, why haven't you mentioned this? Why aren't you talking about it? Why aren't we talking...
Because it doesn't toe the party line.
No.
We've got two parties in Australia. and we've got another one, Green, which is allied to Labor anyway.
But I'm worried.
I think the bigger thing is coming up to this election, and your partner is an independent. I don't know. It's going to be very interesting as to way. I think the independents are going to give it a bit of a shake this year. But I hope that I just wonder how it's going to go in Parliament when you've got all these differing views. It's going to be very fascinating.
Well, Nikola, before we just give us you're in here for I asked you to come in here for the political advertisement. So tell us about Nick Clonarides and what he's. He was a freedom of choice, and he's about corruption, trying to stamp it out. Just give us the sell on Nick.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a bit about him first. He was working in the construction industry, had a great career, hardworking Australian from Greek parents, born here in Melbourne. And
where did he grow up?
He grew up in Frankston. So he's badass. No, he's very gentle, actually. I actually really like Frankston. I didn't know anything about it until I met him. And he lost his job, and he was really, really shocked, and he had no interest in going into politics. But he was very vocal about it. He's actually a guy that was on the good list at 3AW, and he would ring in almost on a daily basis and chat to Neil Mitchell. And I said to him, you must be on some good list somewhere, because no one ever gets through and you do. And he's always like, oh, hi, Nick. And he'd throw his two penneth in on everything from legalising marijuana to all kinds of subjects, traffic. And then when he lost his job, I think he was so shocked that it could happen in Australia, in Victoria. And obviously, luckily, he got re-employed working from home, that we both sort of felt that it's really easy to go out there and say that you're not happy with the situation. But what are we going to tell our children in the future? If things go tits up, if this place changes and life becomes really, really hard and people can't make anything of themselves, even if they work and work and work, because we're so controlled and managed by governments, what are we going to tell our children about what we try to do to help and stop it? So then he decided to step up. So he wants to stop the no jab, no job legislation.
Yep.
End the mandates because they seem horribly unfair. Reunite Australians. Reunite Victorians. Okay.
So what's the tracking? How's he going? How long? When is the next election? November? When is it?
May 21st, isn't it?
That's the federal.
No, that's
federal.
Yeah. This is the federal election.
On the
white
federal.
paper. Yes. On the white paper, you need to vote.
I asked
one.
you that. I asked you that before. I said,
federal.
Isn't the federal election the Senate? And we're not called the Senate in Victoria, are we?
Yeah, I think
we're
so.
called the upper house, aren't we?
Legislative Council.
So he's
Assembly.
standing for the federal.
Yes.
For
Victoria.
I asked you that earlier before we came on air.
It's vitally important. Look.
So he's standing. How's the tracking going? Have we done any research?
Well,
Is he likely to get in?
Well, the thing is, these politicians that have power, unfortunately, they're not doing very well with it. They use our tax dollars to fund their marketing campaigns, millions of dollars to get themselves.
They don't work themselves.
Have a go at the state
just doesn't
government.
seem right, does it? So now we've got the little guys, and Don, you said, well, how's it going to work if this whole bunch of little guys get in and it's all, Well, I think it will work really, really well, because even if there's 1, 2, or 3 votes just in the way, just to stop them when they do something crazy like a no jab, no job legislation. Someone was asking us the other day, we did some canvassing at Akuna Park Market in Berwick. That was really good to test the water, to see how people were feeling. People pretty much are set in their ways where they say, oh, well, I voted Labor or Liberal my whole life. I wouldn't know how to vote differently. Well, you better start thinking how to vote differently.
I think there's a lot of people, I had the same conversation with a voter and he was confused as to which way to go. I think it's going to be very interesting both locally, that's Victoria, and federally. With regard, I think people are disillusioned with the two-party system that we've got at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, now Don, we try and keep these under 60 minutes, and we're just bristling up to 60 minutes. So any other? I'm going to have one more crack at this. Stu Peters. What is his theory about why you can't tell us?
Stu Peters, STEW Peters.
You're
The
gonna tell us
documentary.
Tell me how to get onto Rumble. I want to know. How do
I'll send you the link.
What do you mean? Send me the link.
I'll send you the link to the documentary.
No. Well, how do I find Rumble?
You just go to rumble.com.
So I just put in Google.
Not Bumble, Don.
No.
Well, the thing is, sometimes Google would prefer you don't go to certain websites because, as we know, they don't like you to hear differing opinions.
Right.
So it's always wise to have DuckDuckGo on your phone instead of Google.
What is it?
DuckDuckGo.
Duck.
Go.
No, don't
Oh,
confuse
shit,
him
I'll have
or
to
me.
get
Or me.
Or Ivan. Now, Nikola Charles, actress.
Not anymore. Not now. I've
Provocateur.
spoken.
No, I'm just
Provocateur.
actress, model, entrepreneur, author, and political activist, and astute purveyor or reader of the times that we live in. Thank you very much for coming in. I hope Nick Clonaridis does well for your sake, and we appreciate you coming in. So thank you very much, Ms. Nikola Charles.
Thanks, Sam.